It's pretty wild. I did for real. It's strange. It's so weird when that stuff happens because it's like it's just a clip from a sermon I gave, but it like for some reason caught so or whatever. I don't know if that's catching or not. All right, guys. Woo! Let's go ahead and get started. I want to get rolling on this so you guys have time afterwards. This is the last one of these. All right, unless something changes drastically for some reason going forward. But the plan is for this to be the last one. I'll remind you again. No distracting. You guys have been great at these. This should not be a problem. But if you are distracting, I will send you back to the room, and then you get a 0 on the next test. Unfortunately for you, you still have to take the next test. It just isn't worth anything. This is the last of our set of 3 from this unit. And so we've been exploring the same kinds of themes and the same kinds of patterns over and over from different ways. Today we're going to look a little closer again at Aristotle, and then some more at Augustine. And then we're going to look at the Cavanaugh article that you guys read. So that's the rough outline of where we're going, and then I'll end with sort of a challenge for Christian identity. But let's begin by praying. Gracious God, we thank you for this time. We thank you for the chance to look closely at who you are, and more so in this case, to look closely at what you've called us to. We pray that you would give us the courage and the grace and the bravery necessary to be the people you've called us to be in a world that makes that difficult. We pray that you'd bless our time together, that you'd give us wisdom and discernment, and in your name, amen. Diego, can you make sure that door's closed to Lang's room? That didn't help a ton, did it? A little better. I appreciate it. Thanks. All right, so let's get started. Right away, Aristotle. I mentioned when we first started doing Aristotle stuff that one of the reasons he's important is because he's the first one who really gives us like a catalog of virtues or ethics. He's the first guy to sort of systematize this stuff. This is an example of that. What we're going to talk about today is just some fun examples of this. He has an idea, and it's called Aristotle's golden mean. The word mean here, M-E-A-N, is kind of the way you would use it in math, not the way you would use it as an adjective, right? So he's not talking about mean as in Mr. Richards is a mean teacher. He's talking about mean as in the middle of something, right? So for Aristotle, every virtue exists between 2 vices. So if you have an idea here that vices are practices that are sort of the opposite of virtues, right? Like virtues demonstrate the common good. They grow up out of our community. They're what we value. They're practices that aim towards an end that's virtuous and good. Vices are the opposite of that. Vices might grow up out of our community, but they're not the things that we want to have happen, right? They're not what we want to embrace as a community. They're not things we value, but they are things we do, right? But also vices pull us away from the good, right? They pull us away from the aim or the telos that we're meant to have. So one example here is if you feel this feeling or this emotion of fear, right? Aristotle's going to say the virtue exists between 2 vices. So if you imagine fear is like the prompting agent here, and what's somebody who has the virtue connected to fear? What's the virtue we have like connected to fear? What's a virtuous response to fear? What would we call that? What was it? You said what? Okay. No. All right. Anybody else? The virtue associated with fear is courage. Yeah, Diego, I thought you were going to get that one, dude. All right. Okay. So this is Aristotle's argument. We know courage is the right response. So there's a response to fear that allows fear to have too much weight over us, and there's a response to fear that allows it to have the right. You can't do a line underneath a subtraction sign. Not enough. All right. So if fear has too much control over us, what's that called? What is it if you're too afraid? This is now closer to your answer, Diego. That is the vice, but what vice is it? Weakness is a good guess. We'll go cowardice. Right? So on the one side, you're cowardly, you're afraid, you're so much fear that you're just frozen, right? That it's a problem. What's the opposite side of that? If you don't have enough fear of the situation you're in, right? What's that? Brave, that's pretty close to courage though for us, right? What's bold might be right, that's pretty good. Aristotle's going to use the word rashness. You might kind of put in parentheses stupidity here. Right? You've maybe even heard the quote, right? There's a fine line between bravery and stupidity. That's the point. If we're in a situation and I look at the situation that should cause fear, but I'm so afraid that I can't act, that's cowardice. If I recognize that fear in the right amount, but I can still live and move and have action, that's courage. Courage isn't a lack of fear. It's not acknowledging fear. It's making choices even with fear existing, right? Rashness is not even being aware of the fear, right? Being sort of too dumb to pay attention to the fear at all, right? So this is the like, hey, let me just run across the highway real fast, right? I could do it, right? But I haven't thought about it long enough to be afraid. I just do it, right? Well, how did that happen? This is the cause of all kinds of problems for people in your age group, right? Rashness is just you haven't paid enough attention to fear at all. All right, so this is Aristotle's point. This one right here in the middle, that's the virtue, right? So you have courage, okay? Let me give you a different example that he's going to use. He's going to talk about shame. All right, so for Aristotle, this is the same thing. Your response to shame. There is a virtue connected to shame for Aristotle, and that virtue is modesty. All right, we usually think of modesty around clothing, but Aristotle just means modesty in terms of your actions and your virtue. What sort of impression you give off to the world, or how you act or are in the world, right? So if you feel a ton of shame, right, and you do not have the right amount of shame, you have too much shame, what happens? What's that called? What is it if you feel too much shame? What do you end up doing? Yeah, if somebody shames you so much, yeah, if you're really, really embarrassed, right? What do? You don't talk. This is exactly it, right? This is shy, right? If you're too modest, if you don't have enough shame, too much shame makes you modest or shy or private or closed off, right? Like if you get embarrassed at a party, you want to run away, right? You don't want to stay at the party and try to talk to everybody. That's not how shame works, right? All right, if you showed up to class and you found out you had, something that looked like poop all over the back of your pants, guess what? You're not going to stay in class, right? You're going to leave. You got to get out of there. You got to go hide. You got to change your pants. That's shyness. That grows out of that shame. All right. What if you don't have any of this? Shameless. You're shameless. Diego got one. Nice work, dude. All right. Yeah, this is much closer to Diego. All right. Courage, modesty, shameless, right? You can see this. You can see it here, right? This is the move. Don't worry about courage. I don't know why I said that. All right, but that's what's happening. This is the pattern. So Aristotle pays a ton of attention to this. He looks all over the board at this. He's got a whole list of virtues and then a whole series of vices that are on either side of that virtue. This is known as Aristotle's golden mean. The golden mean is the thing right in the middle, right? That's what you're aiming at for Aristotle. I'll give you one more just because this one's fun. This one is like wittiness. Sorry, that's not the category here. This is, we'll say interesting or conversation. For Aristotle, speaking and conversating is one of the most important things humans can do because it's something humans do that animals don't do. So it's a differentiation. So for him, one of the highest virtues is what he calls wittiness. Wittiness. All right? The easiest definition for wittiness is to say the right thing at the right time. Right? So if something needs to be said that's funny, you say the funny thing. And we usually use it that way. We're really like, oh, he's so witty. Right? He always says the funniest things. Right? That's witty. Some of you guys have not heard anybody say that to you. That's okay. take that to heart, though. There might be reasons, right? So wittiness is that, right? It also is sometimes saying the important thing when it needs to be said, or saying the truth when it needs to be said, or being poignant when it needs to be poignant, right? Wittiness is the right thing at the right time. That's kind of the simple definition of it. So if somebody's interesting in conversation and they say the right thing at the right time, they're witty. What if, the plus minus thing doesn't help a ton here. It gets a little confusing. But what if they're overly interesting, right? Or overly interested maybe in themselves. That's another category for Aristotle, and that's what we call buffoonery. All right, or maybe clown, right? Some of you guys have heard of people who are like this. This class does not have a ton of these people in it, but you guys can figure the math out on this. It does happen. Your senior class has people who might be like this. All right. What about the opposite of that, right? If they're not overly interested in themselves or overly interesting or don't have this wittiness, but the other way, right? This is what you guys will recognize this one pretty. What's the other? What? No, you will. You'll know this one. What? Boring. Yeah. I will also accept laying as an answer on the exam if it shows up. All right. All right. This is worth bonus points if it shows up. All right. So this is the deal, right? This is Aristotle's golden mean. I just want you to know it. I want you to know that it exists. I want you to be able to do that. So if I were to give you a chunk of this on the exam, could you fill it in, right? That's the kind of thing I might do on the quiz. Or if I gave you one that's not on here and just asked you to figure it out, could you sort of navigate it? It's just an idea, but Aristotle's super famous for this. It's a really big idea in the history of the world. Also, it helps us situate virtues again, right? Because he raises the same questions that he's raised before, which is how do we split the difference there, right? How do we live virtuous lives? That leaves us into Augustine. And for Augustine, we're going to continue where we've been talking about Augustine. We know a few things about him already. We've got the city of God. We've got use and enjoy. We have ordered loves, right? All that stuff is Augustinian. On top of that, we've recognized in the past that Augustine has challenged our sense of individualism, right? That Augustine has pushed back against some of the stuff that we take for granted or natural. All right, with that in mind, there's another layer to Augustine that I want to hold out for you. This one's super important, and it's going to be really important for understanding what Cavanaugh is going to do in his article. One of the questions that is going to drive and sort of haunt Augustine his whole life is a question around what freedom is. What does it mean to be free? So I want you guys to think about that for a couple seconds. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands or anything, but just think about it. If I just asked you, give me a picture of what freedom looks like, right? Give me a quick definition, shorthand. What does it mean to be free? All right, all of you have something in your head. I don't know what it is. This isn't one of those like magic shows where I just like tell you the number you were thinking of. Those are awesome though, by the way. But what does it mean? How do you understand what it means? I'm going to give you the picture that I've taken sort of from Augustine. I've updated it because of my own life. It makes more sense to me. The image I want you to have in your head, if you want to draw it, if you just want to have it, Augustine understands freedom to be like a rake. It's a weird image to have, but you guys have raked leaves in your yard before. You know what that is, right? Like this is exactly the time of year we're living in right now. My yard is a disaster, but I grew up with these huge old metal rakes. And the idea was these rakes are designed to rake up leaves, right? So if you have that image in your head, I'm going to unpack it a little bit and explain why Augustine uses something like that as his picture. And it sort of goes like this. When I was growing up, I had these metal rakes, and they had these huge sort of tongs on them at the end, right? Or like these prongs. And as you pull on it, it would grab the leaves and pull them forward. It's designed to do that. However, if you've ever used one of those, and this might just be because I'm old, you guys might not have used these before, but as you use them over the course of time, these prongs start to shoot off in weird directions, right? And so after a while, what was like a 6 or 7 pronged rake turns into like a 3 or 4 pronged rake. Well, and guess what? That rake can't do the thing it was designed to do anymore, right? Because it's been bent or broken or misshapen. This is the idea to catch with Augustine. Freedom for Augustine is the ability to do the thing you were designed to do. All right? You were created on purpose. You were created for a reason. If you are capable of fulfilling that reason, you are free. If you're not capable of fulfilling it, then you're not free. Right? You've been enslaved in some ways. Something has gone wrong. And Augustine's going to say what's gone wrong is sin. Right? That we've been broken and misshapen by sin. We become like that rake that has just these like prongs shooting off in the wrong directions. And because of that, we can't do the thing we were created to do as human beings. Now for Augustine, what were we created to do as human beings? We were created to love God, right? This is the primary, most important thing. This is the thing that sets up all of the orders of love, is the love of God, right? That we're aimed at and built towards the love of God. In Aristotelian language, that's our telos. That's what we're about. That's what it means to be human. To be complete is to be able to love God, right? So if you use Augustine's image of a rake, the idea here is really simple. You're designed to love God, but something in you has broken or been bent or misshapen, and the idea of ordering your life around that love of God becomes almost impossible. So the rest of your life, for Augustine, has to be about getting that freedom back, right? Because if you can't do the thing you were made to do, you're not free yet. Okay? Are you tracking? This is that's Augustine's sort of point. You have to be able to live the life you were designed or created for. All right. We're going to go a step further on this one. The next step to understanding Augustine's piece, you have to be able to do the thing you were designed to do. The second thing is, because of that understanding of the world, Augustine's picture of freedom is going to be very different than your picture of freedom, right? I'll give you one that I come up with. I asked you guys to think about one. When I think about freedom, the image that pops into my head is there's an Asian grocery store like 6 blocks from my house. And when I go into that grocery store, it's amazing. Like they have all kinds of stuff. Like, it's unreal. And I can tell you if you want to know. All right, so we go in, and I go there to buy like this Korean paste that you use to make Korean barbecue with, and it's amazing. But there's a row right before that row that's in that is just soy sauce. Like literally, like if I'm standing over here, if I went from here past that locker to about halfway in the other room, it's one row of soy sauce. Everything on this side is soy sauce. I counted it. I'm not good at counting, but it's close to like 700 different bottles of soy sauce. I don't know how many varieties. Like there's sweet soy sauce, there's sour soy sauce, there's salty soy sauce, there's no salt soy. Like it's like unbelievable the amount of soy sauce. I didn't know you could do this with soy sauce. All right. And when I think of freedom, the thing that pops in my head is, man, I could pick any soy sauce I want. Like I could pick any of the 700. They can't do that in Russia, right? That's what my brain goes to because I'm old. But it's like they can't do that in China. They don't have that much soy sauce. Maybe they do. I don't know. But I don't think so. I think this is like way to go, America. We have all of this, right? It's a huge thing. This is freedom. All right. I think that's freedom because for me, when I think of freedom, I think of choice. And my suspicion is you probably do too, right? If you're free, mostly our conception is that you can choose between two things, right? You can choose the good or the evil. And maybe it's the more good and the less evil, or two evils and the lesser of the two evils, whatever it is. And this is how we think about freedom. To be free is to have choice. To be free is to be able to make a decision and to decide between different things that you want. All right? Augustine's going to say this is not actually freedom at all. Right? Remember, for Augustine, freedom means being able to do the thing you were designed to do, which for Augustine means freedom is about choosing between two goods. All right, so this one Augustine's going to say no to. This one Augustine is going to say yes to. All right, this is what it means to be free. To be free is to choose the best good, right? It doesn't have anything to do with evil. It doesn't factor in. That's not the point. You weren't designed to be evil. You weren't designed to choose evil. So to be free for Augustine, you do what you're designed to do, and that means you choose between goods, not between good and evil. 700 choices for soy sauce is not an interesting thing to Augustine. It never even would have crossed his mind. He didn't have that option, right? But there are other things that do cross his mind on this one. And for him, the ordered love piece is really important here because you get to choose whatever virtue you want in relation to ordered love. Right? Remember the quote we had from Augustine last time, which is, love God and do whatever you want. That's how he understands the Christian life. If you're genuinely aimed at the love of God, then all of these are goods, right? Every choice you can make becomes good because you're doing the thing you were designed to do. If, however, you're not, then you have a different sort of problem. The other piece here that's worth remembering with Augustine, and you guys may not remember this from the readings last year, but we did look at this for just a half a second last year. Augustine doesn't think evil exists, right? Evil exists the same way cold exists or darkness exists, which is it doesn't. It's just the absence of something that's real, right? So for Augustine, the only thing that really exists is good, and that's because it comes from God, right? So in God, there's all goodness. Evil is the absence of that, right? It's the missing part of that. And so you could never choose it because it doesn't actually exist the same way, right? To be free is to choose between the goods. That's really important to understand for Augustine. And he has one more thing. So we have those layers, those first two layers. Here's the last one. And this one's a big deal. The Christian life for Augustine is about desire, right? And this word desire gets associated with Augustine a bunch. But Christian desire is about wanting the right thing in the right way at the right time. And Augustine's going to say, and history's going to back him up on this, I think, that almost every bad decision you make is because of one of those three things not being right. Right? You can kind of see Augustine's thing about alignment again, right? Like, if these are all lined up right, you almost can't make a bad decision. But if they're not, you almost can't make a good decision, right? This is Augustine's point. So you can think about this a bunch of different ways. I'll give you a serious example, and then I'll give you a ridiculous one. So here's the serious example. The serious example, if you want to think about one of the themes from our year, is sex, right? So in Christian tradition and Christian teaching, and Augustine's teaching also, sex is a good thing, right? It's given by God as a good gift. It's meant to be used as a good gift. It's the right thing, right? It's right to desire sex. There's nothing wrong with desiring sex. There's nothing wrong with enjoying sex, right? That's okay. Like, that's the design of the thing. In the right way. What's the right way? For Christians, the right way is within the context of marriage, in a relationship where you both love each other completely and are pouring yourself out in selfless love back and forth, right? So the right thing is sex. The right way is in this like reciprocal loving relationship, covenanted together in marriage at the right time. This is when you're old enough to make this sort of covenant with somebody else who will also covenant with you, right? That's the picture. All right, so where does it go wrong? Well, any of those three things can get out of whack, right? It might just not be the right thing, right? It might be that you're actually called to something totally different than sex, right? Some of you might be called to singleness or celibacy. That can happen, right? Augustine will argue that this is actually a really normal pattern. Jesus himself was single, right? What about the right way? Well, maybe you're not capable of making this commitment. Maybe this commitment's still down the road and you're jumping the gun on it a little bit, right? Or maybe the right time, maybe the person you want to have sex with is way too old or way too young, or maybe you're way too old or way too young, right? Or it's just happening outside the bounds of this, or you can't actually trust the other person or whatever, right? There's a billion ways this goes wrong for us as a culture, right? Can you see what he's doing here? All right, how that alignment ends up working? All right, so for us, this is something to keep in mind. This is what Christian desire, when it's done well, and it's done freely according to Augustine, this is what it's supposed to look like. I'll give you another example that's just kind of fun because I enjoy giving this example. I really love food. All right? That's not 100% true. There's a bunch of food I don't actually love, but desserts, I'm almost like 1,000% on desserts. All right, so now there's times, And I don't know when those times would be, maybe Halloween, where having a candy bar is the right thing, right? I'm a little low on sugar. I've been saving up calories. It's Halloween. We're all eating candy bars, right? It's kind of a jerk move not to eat a candy bar on Halloween. Maybe it's the right thing, right? But maybe there's a right way to eat a candy bar. Maybe it's not 6 candy bars, right? Maybe it's not, 2 giant king-size candy bars or something, right? Or maybe it's the time. Maybe when it's 11 o'clock at night and I'm stayed up late to watch the Bucks lose, maybe that's not the right time to eat a candy bar, right? Maybe I don't eat a candy bar then because now I'm sad that the Bucks lost and it's late at night, and so the calories hit me differently and I'm eating my emotions away, right? These are not great ways to eat a candy bar, right? Is the candy bar itself a problem? Nope, right? Is the desire to eat a candy bar sinful? No, not if it's in the right context, not if it's in the right way, right? But as soon as those things start to get messed up, now it's a problem. Let's take a less silly example, but also still kind of the same thing. Maybe I want to eat an orange. That's awesome. It's healthy, right? They taste delicious. I even actually like peeling oranges. I've learned to enjoy doing that because it's like, oh, this is a little bit of work for something I really enjoy. That's kind of nice. It's a good practice, right? There's a right way to eat an orange. You do have to peel it, right? Turns out if you just kind of eat into it like a weirdo, people are going to look at you strange. But you peel it, you take care of it, all this, right? All that's fine. At the right time, there are times of the day it's okay to eat oranges, almost every time. But there are times where it's not, which is, when you're about to go to bed and all of a sudden it gives you heartburn or something, right? Or maybe you're intentionally fasting so you can pray or do something else so you don't eat then, right? The right way. What if the only way I get oranges is through child slave labor in like El Salvador? Ooh, well now oranges are a problem, right? Because now a choice that I've made is enslaving a really poor family that actually may be brothers or sisters in Christ, right? Now I have a different problem I got to worry about. That's a hypothetical. I know that does happen, right? Like I don't know about oranges, but I know bananas. This is an issue, right? In South American countries and Ecuadorian countries, slave labor and child labor around bananas is a huge problem, right? That's why you can buy bananas for like 23 cents a banana. So there are factors and questions around even some of the stuff that we desire. That's the right thing. It's better to eat fruit than not fruit, right? Ooh, okay, now it gets tricky, right? So, or maybe the right time is just, wait, if I can't eat a banana in season here, why do I have so many bananas at the grocery store? Like, what's happening? Like, asking some of those questions. All right, I'm not here to yell at you about fruit. Okay, that's our layers, though, for Augustine, right? Can you do the thing you were designed to do? Are you free to choose the good and not the good or evil? And can you desire the right thing in the right way at the right time? If you can understand those pieces to Augustine, you largely have a sense out of what he thinks the Christian life is meant to look like. All right, with that in mind, I want to hit again I want to set this up. If this is what freedom is, and we're going to take Augustine as the norm for this, or as the orthodox position on freedom and on the good life, right? If you hold this with Aristotle, now we get into some other questions. All right, so some of those other questions for us as we get ready to transition to Cavanaugh is how do we figure out our own individual stuff in relation to the community, right? So we looked at last time identity and ICR and SCR and all of that stuff, but one of the questions we need to start to ask from Augustine that he's going to keep pushing on us is, can we be free if we're attempting to be autonomous individuals, right? If we're attempting to be individuals primarily, if our self is the starting point, is it possible for us ever to be free for Augustine? I'm just going to let you sit with that question for a little bit. We'll come back to it. All right, so that's one of those. The other one is, our culture tends to equate freedom with maximizing our individual choice, right? I told you the story about the soy sauce, but we do that with everything, right? What kind of car do you want? What kind of shoes are you going to wear? We do it around consumption constantly. We do it around education. You guys are in the process right now of trying to pick colleges, and that's such a huge thing, but it's like, the idea is, we'll apply to 20 colleges and then pick the best one. Why is that a better option than only applying to the one good one you should go to, right? Because we assume more choices is a better option, right? We want to maximize the number of choices we can make. That's how we think about making choices where we are right now and where we live right now. Okay, with that, let's see if we can unpack Cavanaugh's article a little bit. We have all the pieces now, I think, to be able to make sense out of what Cavanaugh is doing. All right. So in Cavanaugh's article, he is making a very, very simple claim initially. That simple claim is that America is an empire. All right. Is an empire. Right. He's sure of it. He spends the whole first chunk of his essay arguing about it and analyzing it. What makes it difficult for him to prove that America is an empire? The thing that makes it difficult is that the way we tell the story as Americans is that we're not, right? America rejects being an empire constantly. We'll constantly say we're not an empire, and there's reasons for this. The biggest reason that we think we're not an empire, at least one of the biggest reasons, is because we did not start out to be an empire, right? When you think about the history, when you think about what you know about U.S. history and world history and how all this stuff started, the U.S. started as an anti-empire, right? We began and we existed to break away from the largest empire in the whole world, which was Britain at the time, right? You guys remember the musical Hamilton, right? The one guy who sings a good song in that, the King of England, whatever. Like, this is what we broke away from, right? That's the idea. We want to break away from that empire. Our roots, our history is started with an anti-empirical push, right? We're not about empire. On top of that, what does every empire need? You need an emperor, right? You have to have somebody you worship or follow or sets the tone for everybody else. These two arguments Cavanaugh has to come to grips with, right? He has to be able to argue that America can still be an empire even though it says it's not, and even though it doesn't have a clear emperor. So how does he resolve this? He first is going to say that the saying you're not an empire doesn't mean you're not an empire. The rest of the world can look at you and see you're an empire, right? That you historically started a different way is not really the issue. But the second part is really the genius part of Cavanaugh's argument. The second part of this is that while it's true that America does not have an emperor in a traditional sense, in a Roman or British or whatever sense, it does have an emperor. The emperor for Americans and for America as an empire is our own freedom, right? The worship of our own choices. Cavanaugh is going to argue that the ultimate freedom, or the freedom to choose, becomes the thing that we worship. All right? So he'll say it a different way. He'll say our ability to worship is what we worship. Right? Our ability to do anything we want is what we end up worshiping. He names this, one quote from this is, precisely because the openness of America's political system, the fact that the shrine is empty, right, where the emperor is supposed to be, is empty, and each person is free to fill with whatever he or she wants, America has discovered the secret of freedom and happiness for everyone. This is how we tell the story, right? So while we say out loud we're not an empire, we didn't start as an empire, we didn't grow as an empire on purpose, any of this kind of stuff. He calls us the reluctant empire, right? We didn't do this on purpose. We do believe that we know what the secret of happiness is for everyone, that everyone should be able to do what they want, right? And this, if you live in a country where you can't do what you want, you're doing it wrong, right? So what do? We go in and stop you from doing it wrong, right? That's what an empire does. That's what we do. That's what the U.S. empire is. He says this a little different way. He says, the empty shrine, however, threatens to make a deity not out of God, but out of our freedom to worship God. So our freedom comes to occupy the empty shrine, and worship becomes worship of our collective self, and civil religion tends to marginalize the worship of the true God. So our freedom finally becomes the one thing we will die and kill for. All right? Our freedom becomes the one thing we will die and kill for. Here's what he names in the article as you think about this. He names that, let's say Aliana and I disagree, right? That she loves One Direction and I think they're overrated, all right? Now, it doesn't matter that I'm right and she's wrong, right? She has to be free to be wrong in order for me to be free to be right, right? This is the American system. This is how it works. So I don't have to agree with her one-on-one like this, right? We can disagree. We could even just not go to Thanksgiving together because we disagree so much on this, right? That'd be a weird choice, but maybe that's what it is, right? Hey, listen, this is how it goes, right? It's New Kids on the Block or nobody for me, right? So this is our disagreement. This is our fight. And that's okay that we disagree and that we don't have the exact same ends in our American policy, right? It's all right that we disagree on all this stuff, except when she becomes threatened or I become threatened, right? Because if there's an outside force that decides to threaten America, right? So if China comes in and says we can't listen to One Direction anymore, now what happens? Now I have to figure out how to stick up for her so that I can keep my rights also, right? My rights are dependent on her having her rights. The second she loses hers, I'm out of mine, right? If you're wondering if this is true, if you think to yourself, man, I don't know that makes sense all the way. I don't get it. Like, why we have to be free to disagree on this stuff so that we can worship the stuff we want to worship ourselves. If you don't think that's true, go back and look at the election, right? This is one of the dominant narratives in this most recent election, is the argument about free speech, the argument about free choice, the argument about doing what you want. Like, there's something inherent in us that needs that to work to make sense. This is the mechanism. He calls this the openness or the ideology of openness. And he says this ideology, this freedom, this choice is the only thing that we will die or kill for. Okay? That's the part you sort of want to have your head around. That stuff matters so much to us because that's the thing that makes our empire work. That's the thing that's on the shrine. So the thing that inhabits the empty shrine is whatever each of us put there, right? It's whatever choices we decide is the most important thing. But as an idea, as an ideology, that you get to decide that is the part. Here's the thing. You haven't lived in other places the same way. You don't understand the way the rest of the world makes choices on this, but not everybody else makes choices that way, right? Other places, you're told who the emperor is. Other places, you're told what's real and what's not real. In America, that's not the way we function or work, all right? So our freedom becomes the one thing we will die and kill for. All right, so that's important. You can understand his argument, right? And the first thing he was going to do is analyze and explain that he thinks America is actually an empire. When you read that section, this is the point he's making. The second thing he's going to do is he's going to critique that empire theologically. What's the problem with empire? So what, America's an empire, right? So you prove we're an empire, big deal. Why is this a problem? All right? Why is this a problem for Cavanaugh? It's a problem because the empire acts and sees as if it was God. He says it this way. Here we come to the theological heart of the empire's project. Empire is perhaps best understood as an attempt to see and act as God sees and acts. Empire is based on a claim of universality, the claim to be able to stand above all the messy particularities of the world's peoples and cultures. Right? This is what it means to be empire, to be able to step back and look at everybody and be able to pronounce judgment. Right? So we can say confidently, as an empire in America, that we can look at the rest of the world and say what they really need is to be able to have freedom and to be able to choose the things they want. Why? Why should they choose the things they want? Because freedom's good, right? And that's how we've defined freedom. How does Augustine define freedom? Not that way, right? Augustine would say this is a terrible choice. The idea that everybody gets what they want means you're assuming everybody's formed the right way. But we're not, right? Most of us, all of us are formed in ways that are broken. If I get everything I want, my whole life would fall apart, right? There's all kinds of things I want that I shouldn't have, that are not good for me. This is Augustine's point. Those things that I want don't make me free. Those things that I want end up enslaving me. And this is Cavanaugh's argument about empire. That empire, especially the Empire of America, ends up doing this almost exactly the same way. He's going to make a point in that same quote. He just mentions that empires are unable to see the world's peoples and cultures, to see them not as Kurds or Cajuns or Pashtuns or Galicians or Navajos and Igbos and Scotsmen, but as human beings, all with the same ultimate aspirations. This is the part that you might catch. In philosophical terms, This project has affinities with the Platonic desire to ascend beyond the mortality into particularities of this world. What he's naming is the empire sees only humans, right? I can't see you in your specifics. I can only see you broadly, right? Well, you're a Hispanic kid from the south side of Milwaukee. I have to identify you that way. I have to know what that group means. That means, your parents work 3 jobs, or it means everybody's immigrated here from the same place, or it means you guys all like certain kinds of tacos, or you only eat at this place or that place. All right? Some of that might end up being true. Some of it's not true. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. We can't figure out how to actually engage in the real specifics there, right? We have to have it way out here at a Platonic level and not the characteristics and the individuality necessary at an Aristotelian level, right? This is, in language that we understand, this is what Cavanaugh is naming for us. So here's the transition question. That's Cavanaugh's sort of analysis and theological critique of empire. The next thing he's going to do is push us on Christian identity. And so the question is, how do Christians live virtuous lives of Augustinian freedom in the face of American empire, right? Is it possible for us to be free the way Augustine challenges us to be free, and to be virtuous in the way Aristotle tells us to be virtuous, if we live in an empire like America? If we live in an empire that values our own freedom and choice more than anything else? All right? Cavanaugh is going to say yes, but it's going to take a different issue, right? The answer is yes, but what it's going to take is allegiance to a different body than the nation, right? So Cavanaugh is going to argue that in order to be genuinely free in an Augustinian sense, we're going to have a robust ecclesiology. This is a huge word. It means church, or an understanding of the church, right? And what he means here is that your primary identity has to come from the church and not from your nation, all right? That if your identity comes from your nation and not the church, you're never going to be free. You're always going to be trapped by your nation. And there's nothing you can do about that part except for to break free from it and to commit your allegiance to Jesus and his body, the church. Okay? So 2 quick things on this, and we'll keep this pace moving a little bit. The first thing is this. One of the problems that Cavanaugh is naming is something called Christian nationalism. And Christian nationalism is a huge problem. Every time you see this, this is a bad thing. This doesn't ever show up in a way that's positive. All right? And the reason Christian nationalism is a problem is because it doesn't understand the church. It doesn't understand the primary identity we have. So Christian nationalism attempts to take your nation and baptize it as Christian. So everything the nation does, it wants to do and just put Jesus on top of that. All right? But when you start this direction, you can't get it right. Right? It's always going to be wrong. If you start this direction, you have a chance of rescuing something here. Okay, so a couple of quick things on this part. Ecclesiology, this just means the study of church, right? Or what we understand church to be. Okay, so if you have this in your head, there are some things that you guys should know already. How many of you guys go to Catholic churches? How many of you guys go to churches that say the creed every Sunday? All right, so there's a part of the creed you say every Sunday. You say, I believe in the Holy Apostolic what? All right, church is right, but there's another word before church. I believe in one holy Catholic. All right. All right. This word, what does Catholic mean? You guys go to Catholic churches. Does it mean fancy robes and a pope? No. The word means something. We've talked about this before, but it was a while ago, so it's fair if you don't remember. All right. It means universal. Which means what? It means this one doesn't count. Right? Your primary allegiance is to a body, the body of Christ, the church, that spans and runs across and through national allegiances. Right? This would be like, this is a terrible example, and it just popped into my head, so if it doesn't work, we'll erase it later. All right? This would be like if I made it to the pros and played for the Packers, right? I became an NFL quarterback. I played for the Packers, and they asked me what team do I play for, and I said Aug Prep's intramural football team, right? It's the wrong category, right? It's not even close to the Packers, right? Or if I was like, oh yeah, I play for the Milwaukee City Public League. What? No, that one's so much smaller than this one, right? Your primary allegiance is to this one because this one's so much bigger. How do you get into this one? I want you to think about this one for a second, right? You're born into this, right? You're born into your nation. You're not born into your church. You're born again into your church, right? This is the language Jesus uses in John 3. But he also uses the language of sacraments, right? We've talked about these before. And sacraments are those practices that shape us and form us into this people, right? If you remember the quote from last year, when we were working on the Rwanda stuff and we were reading Emmanuel Katongle's work, he raised this question. He said, does the blood of tribalism run deeper than the waters of baptism? Does the blood of tribalism run deeper than the waters of baptism? Right? And the question is, which identity wins? Right? Which identity shapes and forms us and makes us who we are? Because you're being shaped and formed. This is Augustine's point. Now, are you being shaped and formed into freedom, or are you being shaped and formed a different way? All right. I want to hit one more thing, and then we're really close to being done now, guys. According to Cavanaugh, he has this quote: Christians were viewed with suspicion by the Romans because their loyalty to Christ cut against their loyalty to any imperial project. In other words, Christians were not questionable citizens of the empire simply because the Romans explicitly worshipped other gods. Christians are questionable citizens of any empire or nation state because their primary political loyalty belongs to the body of Christ. Right? It doesn't matter which empire you're in. It could be ancient Rome, it could be the US now, it could be China now, it could be Russia now. The trick is we've managed to tell the story in a way that makes it seem like we're okay to be both. Right? Cavanaugh's going to tell you you can't. Augustine's going to tell you you can't. I'm going to tell you you can't. All right? That's how this works. That's the dynamic. Like this is just this is really the combination of the American Empire and the challenge. Okay. In the very first lecture I gave you, I made this point, right? And this is what I was thinking of when I think of church. I gave you this definition or this idea. The attempt to live good lives or to be good people outside of any committee or community committed to that goodness captured in the Sermon on the Mount is a colossal waste of your life. The idea of individual autonomy is antithetical to the practice of Christian ethics because it's a fundamental misunderstanding of the task of Christian ethics. Namely, it's a fundamental misunderstanding of what it means to live with Jesus as the norm for human flourishing. Right? Very first lecture I gave you in September, long time ago, we hit on that. The point of this is we have a king already. Do we have an emperor? Yeah, we have a king, and that king is not electable. He doesn't come and go. He doesn't get traded in and out. We have Jesus. Jesus has rescued us into his empire. Jesus has rescued us into his kingdom already. So when we look at these identities, right, we can have the identity in Christ that we've been created and designed to live into. We can order our lives around love, or we can do something else. I want to say this a little more clearly, and I wrote this out. You don't have to take notes on this part. Just listen to this for a second and see if you can understand what I'm trying to say here. All right. So here's what you have to decide on some level. Is your primary identity a self-chosen, self-identifying consumer who shapes the future and your own history through your purchases and your individualized algorithms of influencers and tastes, with your life determined for you by which ad or video you like or spend extra seconds on? Right? This is one option. This is the option I believe you've been given all the time. Right? That you are valuable because of what you can produce and what you can consume. All right? Is that true? Or do you have a suspicion that there's more to your life than that? Is your life more than what you're going to make, and more than what you're going to spend, and more than what you're going to buy or watch or consume? How about this? You are created in the image of God. You are a human being made to love and serve your neighbors in selfless acts of justice and charity. The world and the future are not yours. You have been made for a story that is bigger than you and is not fundamentally about you. The Christian identity recognizes the key core distinction that you are a gift, and all your life is a gift. Approaching the world as a gift fundamentally changes who we are. You are now genuinely free to live lives of gratitude and thanksgiving in the sense of Augustinian freedom. You're free to learn and grow because your knowledge and wisdom is not about making money or consuming more stuff. It's about exploring with wonder the gift you've been given and the one who has given you that gift. You are free to live lives of love, having real relationships of truth-telling and joy because you've been freed to enjoy each other and not simply use other people. Right? This is what all of this points at eventually. Is the Sermon on the Mount, is the way of Jesus, is that a better way of living than the other alternative you've been given? And I cannot answer that for you because I don't have to live your life, but you do, right? I started all of our classes last spring, and I said the reason I teach this stuff is because I want you to live your life intentionally. I don't want you to just have life that you respond to over and over and over again, and then 30 years from now, you're older and fatter, and your life is what it is, right? And you didn't have any say in it. You didn't have any intention to it, all right? We are really good at telling you one version of what your life should look like. And I want you to know that there's an alternative Christian version to this that's existed for 2,000 years of Christians who are genuinely trying to follow Jesus and live out the Sermon on the Mount. That's possible. It's just incredibly difficult, and so much of the world is going to push back against that. Not because they're bad, but because we haven't understood freedom, right? Because we don't know what to do with our choices. All right, with that, we'll be done. You have about 20 minutes left. You can use it however you'd like. If you want to do some reading in your books, you can do that. If you want to talk to people around you, you can do that. If you want to go back over your notes and see if you missed anything, we can do that. With about 2 or 3 minutes left, you should update your scoreboard and make some notes in your exit ticket. When we come back on Wednesday or Monday, we will be taking our test on this stuff. Tuesday, thank you. Tuesday, we'll be taking our test on this stuff. Remember, you cannot use your notes on that test. Or you can use your notes, you can't use your readings on that test, okay? So make sure you know the reading well enough for that. I wrote questions that do not require you to quote the reading. You should be fine if you understand what the reading's saying, if you've gone through it. If you go back over the reading now that we've talked, that'll be fine. You'll be solid at this, okay? All right. Nice work, guys. Thank you. Yep. This is the ungraded one.